Welcome to Where You're At, a podcast that highlights the work of alumni from the Journalism and Media Studies Department at San Diego State University. I'm Pete Frank Williams. Our goal is to share the success of alums, inspire current students with these stories, and connect students and alums for mentoring. And now, here's your host, Josh Shushan.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are heading out to our nation's capital. We're going to Washington, D.C., and we are talking journalism, broadcast journalism, political journalism. Our guest is Raquel Martin. She works for Nexstar Media. She is a political reporter, visual storyteller. She basically reports for about 190 or so local TV stations, and I'm super excited to talk to Raquel and learn about her and her career. Welcome to the podcast, Raquel.
Thanks for reaching out and having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we have SDSU alums are all over the place. They're all over the country. They're all over the world. We have a few who are working in politics, but we don't have a lot. And that's why I'm super excited to talk to you, because it can be very cutthroat. There's a lot of prestige in working in politics, but it's not always the easiest. And so for you, let's start right there. Why did you want to be a political reporter?
Well, I always attribute it back to around high school. My dad watched a lot of news, and particularly at that time, Obama was running, and there was just a lot of energy around that. So I started just kind of like coming home from school and watching it. And we used to watch Chris Matthews' Hardball a lot. And that was a very contentious, adversarial interview style that's just kind of captivating. So I kind of got into politics probably through Chris Matthews and my dad. And then when I decided I wanted to pursue journalism, I definitely was like tunnel vision. I want to cover politics if I do that. And so that's why I kind of had an emphasis in poli-sci as well.
Yeah. It's really great when people as a freshman know exactly what they want to do, and that's what they end up doing. It doesn't always work out. How did being a political science minor and a journalism major help get you here?
That's a good question. I mean, when I started taking courses in poli-sci, it just re-emphasized my interest in it. I will say my poli-sci classes were my favorite part of school. I had like a way better grade point average in the emphasis portion than just like journalism, strangely. And I guess, yeah, it just reinforced like what I wanted to focus on, because there was, and even classes like sociology, just talking about the world we live in and like dissecting it was always nice to just have those discussions. So with that in mind, it motivated me to find certain stories to talk about certain subjects. So yeah, that's kind of how poli-sci kind of made its way through.
Okay, so explain to us how this works. You work for Nexstar Media, and from what I see from your website and your bio, you report for about 190 stations. Give us kind of the ins and outs of who tells you what stories to do, when you do your own stories, and how you're able to send these stories off to all the affiliates.
Got it. So every day I actually just need to know what's going on in Washington and politics in general. I pitch my story every morning at a meeting with my about 8 other colleagues who are also reporting here from Washington. When I first got here, there was a big emphasis on we all had a region, and I still do have a region. That's my primary focus, which is the Midwest. Maybe about 5 states where I focus in on those lawmakers in those states, but they're here in Washington, of course. There'll be weeks where I pitch a broad story about just a big topic going on here. And sometimes I do hyper local stories about what's going on in the ag industry, for instance, because I cover the Midwest. I talk to farmers, I talk to the manufacturer sector, just issues that would impact those local economies. And so, yeah, every day I pitch a story, I go out, I gather it, I put it together, and we put it up. I either go live or I just put it up on a server where our local stations are able to download it and fit it in their newscast as it fits.
So as you said that, I thought about something that I always heard Chris Matthews say, which is all politics is local, right? That's one of his things that he said all the time. So I think that's really interesting because, I think for most people, when they hear politics, they just think covering the president. But there's so many other different levels of covering DC politics. So tell us a little bit more about how all politics is local and the emphasis of finding those stories and those lawmakers in those Midwestern states for you.
Well, I started out covering a state house in Illinois, so I think it was more local, right? That's just a layer down, and your state legislator, most people aren't paying attention, but have so much of the final say and make so much of more of a direct impact in your day-to-day lives. that you want people to pay attention. But when I covered the state house, it was almost easier for me to do those very tangible, real people stories because I could literally leave the state house and go find people, right, in Illinois impacted by whatever bill was being proposed. And, talk to them about the food deserts in their community, gun violence, et cetera. A lot of the legislation you'll see come forward and profile them and, and do a people story. Here in Washington, that's a little bit more difficult, I will say, because I'm not there. Zoom, as we mentioned, can be a tool to kind of bridge that gap. But some days I am just taking a broad subject and maybe talking to a Midwest lawmaker who can provide that layer and context for me. But there are 1,000 things being discussed policy-wise on Capitol Hill. And we have hearings every week, multiple hearings a day. And there's issues that I've kind of clung on to because of the people that I don't represent, but that I'm covering politics for. Like I said, ag, that's something that's a huge driver of the Midwest. And then there's other issues, like I really like big tech issues, just because it's the future. It has a lasting impact, and we're still trying to wrap our heads around what its impact is having on us mentally, physically. There's so many ramifications, and there's very little regulations. So yeah, there's just topics, and there's a wide variety. I literally just did an interview with the HUD Deputy Secretary to talk about affordable housing. There's just not a shortage of things to talk about here, but there is a way to localize it, by talking to a lawmaker from Illinois or Iowa, and maybe they can provide a little bit more context to why it matters for people back at home.
So one of the things I like to do with this podcast is I think about if someone's a student right now, someone's 18 to 22, and maybe someone's thinking about, hey, I want to cover politics. I want to be another Raquel. And so I want to make sure that we don't scare them away, but we also make sure that they are aware of what is involved in covering politics. So what is some of your advice to a current college student, even a high school student who thinks, yeah, I want to do the same thing as Raquel? What are the things they should know about covering politics?
Well, first off, you mentioned how I guess that poli-sci worked its way into or helped me determine my path, I believe. And how did it help? And I always say that when I got into this, it was very sink or swim. I literally left California and covered Illinois politics. And there was no course at San Diego State that would have prepared me for the history of the Chicago Democratic machine there. And I came there and there was a budget impasse. So what I will say is, there will be a learning curve. And what you have to do is just really love it, really sincerely care. And every day you have to be teaching yourself. I, downloaded so many podcasts. I'm reading stuff all the time because you never know when you're going to have to hop on a topic, and you want to always have context. You never want to go into any political event with just a blank slate and just be telling what happened that day. That's never the story. Half of this is history. So I would just encourage anyone who wants to cover politics to actually really care, really love it. It's not glamorous. It's a lot. Anyone that I know here is, even some of my friends who are print reporters or, they're racing actor lawmakers in the hallways with their phones out. It's nothing about it is glamorous. You have to really be invested in the purpose of it all. But if you do love it, you will feel fulfilled at the end of the day. You will feel the weight of the world on your shoulders because it's so consequential as well. But I think most people I know in this bubble who cover this enjoy it. And I think anybody who has that natural drive and curiosity and desire to, shine light on what's happening at the center of democracy, to go for it. And there's so many avenues more now than when I first started, as far as digital and streaming. There's so many ways to add your voice to the conversation now.
I love the phrase you just gave, shining light on democracy, because of just how important it is. I work in baseball. This doesn't really matter, right? Like, this is just a fun thing, right? So that's why I have so much respect for you and other reporters who are doing like real journalism and stuff that matters. And when you mentioned about listening to podcasts and reading and just diving into it, let's face it, politicians want to get away with saying a lot of things that aren't true, or they want to try and spin things. So I'm wondering if you can speak to the importance of being able to say, in a respectful, cordial, yet stern way, When a politician is saying something that maybe they voted differently 6 months before, or maybe their position has changed, and the importance of having your research ready for those moments.
Right. I mean, because I've been covering Capitol Hill in particular for 4 years, and I kind of have a relationship with many offices, I'm not sure if they try to get away with too much in front of me just because they're aware maybe I'm tracking it, but there are times where there might be a contradiction in a statement. And that just takes, a follow-up question. In my role, sometimes I'm in a tight window and I'm trying to ask 1,000 questions, and I could spend a lot of time going back and forth with the lawmaker, but sometimes my role is just getting someone on the record and getting their statement and filling that context in with myself, reaching back out to the office to clarify a statement, But it is important to push back when there is a falsehood and there are circumstances. I remember when former President Trump was facing an impeachment trial for the first time, and there was a lawmaker that walked off the camera. They didn't like the where the questions were going, but that's not. My job is not to soften this. I'm just asking the factual questions. I don't take it personal. But that's the nature of the job, and the nature of my job is not to make this more flattering for you. I'm supposed to get you on the record. I'm supposed to see where you stand on these very important issues, and that may require a follow-up question. And that's just the nature of it.
Since you got started watching TV with your dad, what does your dad think? How proud is your dad of what you become?
I always call my dad he's my stage dad. I always call him that because he'll sometimes text me because I come on KTLA now, and I'm from Long Beach, so my parents can actually watch me, which is always fun. And when they do catch me, to give me feedback, my dad did a great job, and and he also, it's not even just about my feedback. My dad's just invested in what's going on. So he'll be like, did you see that press conference? He's all in. So I feel like I just have someone to deep dive politics with as well now, because he's right there with me, day to day, seeing what's going on in Washington.
Oh, I love it. That's super cute. Give us some kind of behind the scenes in terms of how often are you shooting, editing, producing, in addition to being on camera. Give our students and other alums kind of a window into all the different hats that you have to wear with your job.
Well, any given moment, if there's not a photog available, I am technically MMJ. I have to pick up that camera and run. And I haven't done it often, but the last thing I did that I remember, because it was excruciatingly hot, was a press conference or a somewhat protest. Some Democratic lawmakers went outside the Supreme Court, and it was after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and did kind of a sit-in and got arrested. And I had to shoot all that by myself, and it was really hot. And I remember that. But on a day-to-day, I work with a photog typically, but I am writing, pitching my story, like I mentioned, writing, editing, going out and getting these interviews, and I'm editing it and I'm putting it up. And I have a rotating schedule. So some weeks I am just 9 to 5 and I have a purpose. I have that one story, and the end goal is getting it out there for my stations. And then there's some weeks where I do that, and I also, after I'm done, go hop in the studio and do what we would call a live shot marathon, where I'm doing anywhere between maybe 15, 20 to 40 plus live shots for about a span of maybe 4 hours with our stations across the country. And that's a live, you present your story plays, and then you tie it up in a nice bow at the end. Sometimes you do questions and answers with anchors. And that's functional part of my job. And like I always say, it's not glamorous. The last thing I do in my day is put the makeup on to look glamorous, but everything else is not.
What is the longest of these marathon interview Q&As live shots that you've done? 2 hours, 3 hours? What's the longest?
Well, I always do a 4 hour span. So the time span doesn't change. It's just the amount. We have what we call a grid. It's essentially an Excel sheet where all the stations can, every 5-minute window, they can put in their information and we'll go to the next, right? And there's been occasions, I will remember after January 6th, that morning, I was the live shot person. So I came in, and I don't remember how many. I just know it was nonstop, The night of the election, the 2020 election, Trump, or maybe it wasn't even just the night. It probably was the night of, I don't remember. Whenever he went into the briefing room, I was doing live shots live, and it's unprecedented that he's even doing half this stuff. So having to talk with the anchors about what we're seeing unravel in real time, with the president going and saying it's stolen in the briefing room during we're still trying to figure out, the electoral count and who won and whatnot. So definitely been some interesting times, but a lot of demand in those moments because they're so consequential and we are the hub of politics for all our stations.
In those really critical times like that, whether it's January 6th, whether it's an election, what are some of the things that you remind yourself in order to stay calm and stay focused, even when there's hectic things going on, even when things are being said and it's extremely not normal, to put it mildly? What are the things that you do to just stay calm and poised and be able to report the way that you want to report?
Well, always remember that I never want to put my thumb on the scale and I just want to get the information out. I want to always add as much context and whatnot to the situation. As far as like my temperament and not getting worked up, what I will say is when I first started, and I still struggle with it, getting kind of anxious, right? Mm-hmm. When I first started, the being on TV part was not natural for me. I will say, I know some girls that I did J school with, and they were naturals on TV. Like, I was a nervous wreck. So now that I've done it for some time, don't overthink it. Like sometimes over preparing will kind of freak me out more. Having too many thoughts in my head before I go on air. Sometimes my best work has been just super impulsive, and just taking a deep breath and being human and trying not to be perfect, just trying to deliver a good, accurate information, slowing down. That's just kind of how I just don't want to fumble the whole situation by overthinking it and trying to just remain calm. You can look down, you can read things, it's not about me is another thing to keep in mind. Like how I'm coming off and all that stuff is not the point. I'm trying to deliver information to people that they can digest. So like keeping that mission in mind can help kind of take the pressure off of yourself, because I know a lot of people get in TV and it's just how many people are looking at me, and you can get in your own way in your own head. But if you remember that the mission is to help people, to break these things down, to be a tool in some way, it helps you kind of simmer and just get that information out.
I'm glad that you said slow down, because that's the thing that I probably struggle with the most. And I constantly try to remind myself is just slow down. And again, we're in totally different professions. You're politics and you're looking to a camera and delivering serious news. I'm describing a baseball game. And so it's totally different worlds. But I know that when I get into trouble, it's when I talk too fast or when I try to give so much information because I want to prove that I've done all this research and I know every piece of background about every baseball player. And there's no way the audience is going to remember all of that anyways. And so I've just tried to really remind myself, it's better to tell people 3 good things that they can remember rather than try to talk super fast and try to jam like these 8, 9, 10 things. Like that doesn't work. So I'm glad that I can relate to someone as well. And I think that's just really good advice for students about slow down. And it's about making sure you get the information, the key points in the right amount of time.
And I will say that's something I'm still working on myself. I am a motor mouth. I talk super fast. My boss will tell me to slow down, and so that takes less coffee some days. Right. I'm like, I've had 2 cups of coffee, probably shouldn't have the 3rd, so that I'm not, that'll happen. So yeah, definitely something you have to work for, right? Because instinctively, if you are a fast talker, you are going to be a fast talker when you're trying to get the information out. But that deep breath can go a long way.
The other thing that I remember seeing once on TV, and I thought this is so simple, but it's the best advice. And someone's on TV and he goes, and I'm going to look down at my notes because this is really important and I want to get this right. And I just thought that's just so simple, yet so smart. You don't always have to stare into the camera and have this number memorized. It's okay to say, and I'm going to look at my notes to make sure I get this right. And then I'm going to look back to the camera. And I went, gosh, that's so simple, but so brilliant.
Yeah, it's just being human. I went to a workshop recently. It's interesting because the industry is kind of shifting in a sense to emphasize that human nature, right? Because it's been kind of a caricature, the reporter voice, the reporter presentation. And it's a national network, and they were just emphasizing that we pivot to being ourselves, right? Less of the voice, all of that. And that also is if you got to read something, just read it. Nothing. We're all human, And I was watching a veteran reporter on ABC after Uvalde, and he was. I was surprised at how much he just had the notebook right here. And it didn't take anybody. Does that make you less credible? No, that you're actually probably more accurate because you're, looking at something. So, I at times will look, especially if it's incoming information. Oh, so-and-so just tweeted, and I'm just looking at a tweet, that's just the nature of it. And I think leaning into that is a good thing.
It's time for a quick break from this week's podcast. I'm Amy J. Smith from the class of '98, and I'm a voiceover artist based in Los Angeles. I'm available for film narration, radio and TV commercials, documentaries, how-to explainer videos, and much more. You can contact me at amyvo.com. And now, back to this week's podcast. Here's Josh.
All right, let's rewind. Let's go back. And you're a freshman at San Diego State. Why San Diego State? What did going to the campus mean to you?
I fell in love with San Diego State right when I walked on campus. I think a lot of people have that reaction. Like, I remember telling my mom, I belong here.
I was the exact same way.
Right, like a California kid is just like an oasis, right? It's palm trees, it's blue skies, it's these white beautiful buildings, in San Diego, it was like a little paradise. So it was aesthetically like a great fit. And then I got a scholarship, I will say. I was a presidential scholar. So I got an academic scholarship to go to San Diego State. So that really helped me narrow down my choices. And I loved it. So it was like easy peasy. And they had a journalism school. So that's kind of how I picked it. But it was, I met friends right away. It was just an easy transition. And, I am a California girl through and through, and the beach is not far. There's beautiful hiking. I was a happy camper down in San Diego.
Yeah. And you were very active. You worked at the Daily Aztec. You worked at KCR. You worked at San Diego Union Tribune. I'm a Daily Aztec alum as well. So give me some Daily Aztec memories here.
I used to love the Daily Aztec. I mean, I remember, I don't know if it was the same or if it even remains this way, but you can't just start out as a journalism major, right? You have to start out as a pre-journalism major at San Diego State. You have to test into it essentially. And I tried to get an internship my freshman year, sophomore, or my freshman year, maybe my first or second semester. Just I reached out to KUSI, and they're like, well, can you even have an internship? And that's when I found out I couldn't. So I think not a mentor, a counselor told me maybe try writing for the Daily Aztec. So I think I connected with them, and I was so nervous. I wrote, they gave me an assignment. I had no clue what I'm doing. I'm 18, I don't know, or 19. I might've did it my sophomore year, but nonetheless, it was my first introduction to the news world, because it wasn't through my classes. It was through this. And that was and now it's just a part of my life. You come in, you sit down, people throw out ideas, I got assigned probably my first story because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I remember was talking to some diversity inclusion professor who was new, and they wanted me to profile him or something he was doing. And I came and we sat down. I had my questions written out. It was probably terrible, but I remember I got my first little byline, and I think everyone remembers their first little byline.
Yeah.
Okay, this is I saw my work, you saw your work and your article, and I was super proud of it. And then we kept going. Now I couldn't really balance staying with the Daily Aztec and internships, and I ran for student government. At one point I was doing way too much. So I didn't get to stay there long, but I think they really did help me get some bylines. I got an off-campus job with the local publication, The Voice and Viewpoint, which is the Black newspaper for San Diego. And I got to freelance there, but that was because of, they gave me my start. Daily Aztec was that was my introduction to being a journalist. I started writing articles, and I wrote a handful, and I was really proud of them. And that's how my first little stepping stone to getting, my outside job and my first internship. And then my second, it was all started with the Daily Aztec.
Man, as you're saying that, it's bringing back so many memories for me too. I remember being in the office the first time and typing up a story and just like my fingers shaking or my body shaking, right?
It's nerve-wracking. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And you're wondering, like, does everyone, and it just seems like everybody else knows what they're doing, and then you're like, tentatively like read it over, like, oh, I don't want to make any mistakes, but no, the story's due. And what's this editor going to think as I turn it in? And then there was things that I did that I forgot. My mom recently sent, apparently I took a copy of the Daily Aztec and I wrapped it in like a piece of paper and I put a stamp and mailed it to my mom. And for like the return address, I wrote something like the person who wrote a story on page 5A or something like that. Like that was the way that I was mailing articles back to parents and friends. And I remember the first time like walking into in the dorms or wherever it was, and someone's like, "Oh, Josh, I saw your byline," and just getting all like excited, like, "Oh,
yeah."
Okay,
I remember someone telling me you saw mine, and I was like,
"Yeah."
I think everyone remembers their first article.
Yeah, or when you're sitting. I remember sitting in class before it starts and someone's reading it, and then you're kind of like leaning over, like, "Are they reading my article? Are they reading like that person? Like, what story are they reading right now?" And it's just and you're like, "Oh, okay, cool. This is," I remember I found it really intimidating to be on a campus that big, and it allowed me like this little world. And I was like, okay, I got this little world, this little bubble. And then from there, it made it easier to kind of expand out to like, and understand everything that's going on in the campus.
Right. Yeah, it gave you like a little community, and it gave you a community that could be impactful, right? It's, you feel like a public instrument. Like, not every student on San Diego State's campus is reading the news, but like, they were still making news. We're still covering the pulse of the campus and things that are moving and shaking. And if you want to know what's going on, it was nice to be part of the community that was informing you. That's like how you get your feet wet. And I like you, I remember when someone's like, "Oh, I saw your article." And I'm like, "Saw an article?" Like, wow. Super excited. And I think, it was just, it was what lit the flame. And I always have fond memories of my Daily Aztec days.
If you could give yourself advice, your younger self advice, what would you look back on from your time at San Diego State that you would either like do differently, do more of, do less? What kind of advice would you give your younger self?
That's a good question, because there's nothing I regret. And, I think everything happens for a reason. I don't know. I really did come in with pretty much tunnel vision. Probably wouldn't have overexerted myself senior year the way I did. So I could focus more on being good at everything versus doing everything. Because I think getting your head trying to get that resume versus being present for what you're doing. So I was very committed to being like this all-star by the time I graduated with this just epic resume. And it was fine, right? It wasn't like superb, but I got 2 internships. I was in student government, like trying to check 1,000 boxes. And I think the only thing I would give myself advice is just focus on the quality of what you're doing versus just trying to do everything. Because it worked out, but pulling yourself in that many directions is just going to dilute the quality of what you do inevitably.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. I can relate to that, especially my last year when I was doing way too many things, and it definitely hurt my grades. Something had to suffer, and what suffered was grades. The grades. Because I will also say, when like Society of Professional Journalists, I was in that club, and we used to have guest speakers. And I remember, I'm not going to say their name, but they were like a known anchor in San Diego. And they came in like, "Don't worry about your class. It's all about your outside experience." Like, just said that flat out. It was like, "We don't care about your grade point average. Just get that experience." And like 2 or 3 people re-emphasized that or reinforced that for me. And it was, I won't say the worst advice, but it just made me not be too stretched out, because I was trying to do so many outside things versus focus on like the one specific thing, which is just, being a good student. Yeah. That's a really good segue to putting together your demo reel. What do you like to put in your demo reel? What is your advice to students on what to emphasize in their demo reel? Because ultimately that's how you get hired.
That is how you get hired. And I was very critical of mine. I guess there's some advice I would give other young journalists or aspiring journalists. 1, get everything you can, doing everything you can, right? We want to see variety. We want to see presence on camera. I remember, I don't know how things are anymore, but being creative, like a creative stand up, say like moving the camera around, things that catch your attention. Because what's ingrained in me based on how I was taught was like, how are you going to get that mom's attention who's getting her kids ready for school? Like not to sensationalize your journalism, but to make it a head turner or make you intrigued. Like, how am I going to suck people in? And I think you should bring that type of care to your on-camera presence. How, if you're on mute, do you look like you want to take you off mute, So just kind of having some presence about you, being creative in how you illustrate or storytell in general. I am kind of separated from a lot of that creativity space because I'm in politics. I'm not really covering this local cool thing where I can do a cute stand-up. I'm just kind of telling you about legislation now. Right. But when I was in more local news, if I'm spotlighting something, I could get creative. I remember when I was in Illinois, there was this app that was like, scan your face and it shows you what piece of art you look like, right? I remember taking that opportunity to do a cool stand-up. Those are like, make sure you think outside the box to try and get people engaged.
When it came to making these moves that you made, San Diego to Los Angeles to Illinois and then to DC, walk us through kind of the decision-making for you, kind of the key decisions that you have to make, how easy they are, how hard they are when you decide, okay, it's time to move on to this market. It's time to move on to another market.
Well, when I left San Diego State, I graduated and I tried to just be a writer. I kind of slow walked, just I think out of being kind of anxious about the whole jumping out and going to another state. So I said, I want to somehow come back to Los Angeles to work, but I've never worked there. So I applied for a job at ABC-7 in LA, and I worked there for 2 years. One, I will say, if you ever want to get somewhere, do your research about who works at that station. Because what I did is I looked at everyone's bio. Luckily, Adrienne Alpert, who is an SDSU alumni, his name is AA, so I didn't have to look much longer. But I saw that, reached out to her. Hey, I went to San Diego State, would love to grab coffee with her. She helped me get my foot in the door. And I love Adrienne. She's amazing. She, it's these incremental relationships and intentions that really help you in your career. Just networking and not being afraid to reach out to people. And if we have a network, utilize that. That's what we're here for.
And quick segue, that's what this podcast is here for.
Yeah, precisely. Yes. So thank you for bridging this as well. But I worked there for 2 years. And I will say I kind of got sucked into working at ABC-7 because I worked on the assignment desk. Anyone familiar with an assignment desk is just breaking news, finding news, and it's kind of a hustle bustle. And I got sucked into it. A mentor told me, you need to just go. If you want to be on camera, go. So I applied for a job. I applied for a general assignment and then divine intervention. Didn't get that. They said, we have a state house job, which is exactly what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So I did that for 2 years. And, the nature of broadcast journalism is usually, especially in your early years, you're trying to have building blocks. Your contracts are 2 years. So when a year and a half is up, I'm already looking, where am I going next? So I go to an ABJ conference. That's another networking opportunity. Bumped into a girl who worked at our DC bureau, asked her about it, exchanged contacts. She ends up letting me know when there's an opening, and that's how I was able to email my current boss, and we were interviewed, and I got the job in DC. So it's half work, it's half networking, and everyone will tell you that. And, just being constantly, putting yourself out there and also hustling. And yeah, that's kind of how the stepping stones to get, and also the work you do needs to speak for itself, getting bosses that will vouch for you, because your next boss is going to call your last boss mm-hmm. and be like, is she any good?
Yeah.
So it's not just trying to get to the next spot, it's doing quality work when you're there, so that people will actually vouch for your work.
I think that story that you just told is critical for knowing about jobs before they might become public, because a lot of times by the time that it hits these websites where they're open, someone like Raquel already had the end because I already met someone at this conference. And so, it's really important.
That's kind of sorry, I didn't mean to interject. I was just going to add that's just kind of the nature of journalism. So like mm-hmm. a good journalist is kind of dodoing that already. They mm-hmm. go hand in hand. It's almost like you're getting the scoop and that's your job. So they kind of want to go get her. They want someone who is, I was calling newsrooms. I asked, even the interview I got, I called and I was in Chicago for Christmas. for some extended family, and the job was 2 hours south. I said, I can come in for the interview. And a mentor had told me, just volunteer to go. And that's how I was able to seal the deal with that job, getting an in-person interview. And just, I don't know, I especially for early on, just kind of having that drive and showing that go-getter spirit, I think a lot of news directors appreciate.
I did that once. I told someone, I said, hey, I'm going to be in your town because I'm visiting family. You know, maybe it's an opportunity for us to talk. I had no plans to be in that town, but you know, I lied. I lied blatantly, but he said, yeah, okay. And I remember thinking, so is this an interview or not? And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to treat it like an interview. I'm going to prepare like an interview. I'm going to dress like it's an interview. And if it's not, it's not. But at least he knows that this is the way that I approach things, and I ended up getting the job. I tried that a couple of other times and it didn't work. But the one time it did work. But
hey, it worked enough. So yes. Yeah, I think that's always solid advice to just, especially for those early markets. Hey, I'm in your town. In the later markets, just try to get that face-to-face because you want to separate yourself from just a name in a pile.
Okay, you already mentioned Adrian Albert. Is there any other San Diego State alums that you want to brag about as we continue to share a spotlight on all these different San Diego State alums who are making us proud around the country?
I mean, Adrian is probably my top just because like she really took me under her wing. And honestly, now I feel like I just want to email her and be like, and check in. Because I used to go to ABC-7 when I came home just to see everyone because I worked with them for so long. And now I just kind of want to go visit my ABC-7 fam as well. Alumni, I that's like probably top tier, someone who really looked out for me. Also, Sandra Cook, and I think she was in admissions, but she was over my scholarship program. And she was there for me through trials and tribulations as I was trying to navigate, you know, college and balance, like I said. She kind of went to bat for me and always had my back and always had great advice. So it helped get me through San Diego State in peace.
Yeah. All right. This week for the alum that I'm going to brag about, there's actually so many different because at the time that Raquel and I are recording this, it's not too long after I was just in Houston at the Final Four to watch our beloved Aztecs make us so proud. And it felt like it was a daily.
I was so looking to having that bragging rights. I was ready.
Yes.
And you know, obviously we know how that plays. But
it was like a Daily Aztec reunion because, you know, I stayed at this house where there was 10 other people. A guy I know from the Daily Aztec, he hosted, he's got this big old house in Houston. So it was like a slumber party for all of us. And when Lamont Butler hit the shot, when Lamont hit the game winner in the semifinals, there was 10 of us and we all just went nuts and we're hugging each other and just going crazy. So it was just so much fun. And I got to just, again, all these different people who I met through the Daily Aztec and who I'm still friends with. But there's one like Daily Aztec adjacent person who I want to spotlight. His name is Tom Fletcher. He was actually a long snapper on the football team. He played there when Marshall Faulk played there. And Tom was roommates with this guy named Matt Linville, who worked at the Daily Aztec. And Matt was really good friends with me. And Tom was a communications major. And we always felt like he was an honorary Daily Aztec guy just because he was roommates with Matt and he was our friend. And Tom's done great things. He got into the NFL. He was a long snapper for 2 different teams, including the Raiders. And then he worked for Special Olympics for a while. And he worked for IMG Media. And he worked for the Portland Trailblazers, and now he works for the Phoenix Suns. He does corporate development and sponsorships. And it seems like everywhere I go, I meet someone who knows Tom Fletcher and just has like happy things to say about him. There's a guy on our team this year. He came up to me and he said, hey, you know Tom Fletcher too? And I was like, yeah. And we just had this instant bond because Fletch is just such a good person. And I got to see him and his wife and his daughter and his son. His son was a long snapper for Alabama and won national titles there. So Tom Fletcher, just a good person, a communications major, and he's my guy I'm bragging about this week.
I'm assuming you pick someone new every week.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Yeah, every week. Okay, Raquel, this has been super fun. Is there anything else that I did not ask you about San Diego State or about your job that you just think would be good advice that students should know or that you think that other alums should know?
Good question. I don't know. You asked so many of the good questions. I don't even know if I have much more to add. I want to reemphasize, I've been in the industry for about 8 years now and seeing people enter and exit, just having an understanding of what you're getting yourself into and it not being glamorous, but it is so rewarding. And I guess one thing we didn't touch on is just kind of mental health and everything. What we do can be heavy. So, and I remember when I took my journalism 101 class. It was kind of like a footnote, you could have PTSD because you see crazy stuff. But no, that's a real thing. So taking care of yourself and having a good community. If you do go into this, don't be afraid to reach out to your colleagues, coworkers, anyone, just to talk about things, because it can just be heavy. And even if that's not, seeing physically, jarring things, just the weight of the world and constantly being aware of it, because that's your job, can be taxing. So just always figuring out how to have a nice balance and people to talk to is important as well.
That's super important. I'm glad that you brought that up because it can be very heavy. There's a lot of terrible things that journalists see that they have to report on, and that takes a toll. I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Okay, Raquel, this was so much fun. I'm glad to meet you via Zoom and learn about your career and let everybody else know about how awesome you're doing back in DC, making us proud.
Thanks. Well, thank you for having me, Josh. It was great just chatting. We'd love to see another SDSU alumni thriving. And I look forward to continue to watch it and stay connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder for students, if you like what you heard, reach out to Raquel. I always like to say, I'm not going to give how to reach her.
Yeah, definitely reach out.
Yeah, reach out to Raquel. I don't like to give out people's handles and email addresses. I want them to be good journalists and find you. It's not that hard to find you. So do that. Yeah. Make a connection with Raquel the way that she made a connection with Adrian Albert. And you never know, just keep it going.
Anyone else out, if they have any questions, happy to answer.
Yeah. All right. Once again, this is the Where You At podcast. My name is Josh Sushan. I'm your host. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Amy J. Smith from the class of 98. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and the artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know, where you at? Tell us about your career. Get involved in the department. You can donate your time or your money. You can mentor students. You can speak in the classroom, in person or Zoom. You can provide internship opportunities to students. Help us grow the department. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs!